Can all of the stars fit into one room? Welcome to Philosopher's Corner. I'm John. Can all of the stars fit into one room? Well, they did. Let's start there. In our current reality and configuration and the way the physics work here in the Milky Way currently, can all the stars fit in one room? No. But also yes. Because we know that in the beginning, all of the stars were in one tiny point of existence at the last moment of the Big Bang being together, right before it went and exploded into the void and creation was created. Now, in our reality, like in the current physics configuration, all that, no, we can't even fit, one star into a room. But this leads to a great philosophical thought exercise regarding any sort of existential topic. And that is, since the universe is infinite, and philosophically we can go forwards or backwards in the evolution of creation, the answer to any sort of existential question is both things. It's yes and no, depending. But since you can say yes, it means that anything is possible. So can all the stars fit in one room? Yes. Can all the stars fit in one room? No. But you can sit with both concepts in your head. Like, according to Orthodox science, they all were, on something. All of creation was like in something less the size of a pinhead, according to Orthodox science, right? The Big Bang. So in that sense, it's yes. And in that sense, in that moment, any sort of existential question like that is yes. Now, at this point in its evolution, of its flow of growth, the answer in our part neck of the woods would be no. Can you fit all the stars into one room? But it's the same thought mentality of yes and no, being able to hold that simultaneously, 1 and 0, everything and nothing, holding those concepts simultaneously in the mind, which creates the spectrum for thought, and to be able to be an antenna and observe reality, like receive it in. Because it is infinite, which means yes. And then also things have rules and limits, so sometimes it means no. So 1 and 0. Things have a beginning and an end, an alpha and omega, yes and no. And that is where, if we were just talking about it, and for a lot of philosophers, they just had to talk about it and conceptualize it for a long time, where eventually it leads us into modern physics, where thankfully in the quantum realm, they figured out the, wavicle, where piece of matter acts like a wave and a particle, right? At both things, until some consciousness is applied to the wave, and then it collapses, the wave collapses, and it becomes a particle. It materializes, basically. Consciousness hits the wave, and then boom, it acts like a particle. It gets solid. It stops shifting around. It stops being so shifty. But when you're watching that, conceptually, when it's a wavicle, it's both a wave and a particle simultaneously. Like, it's holding both things equally, the development of it, the potential of it equally simultaneously, right? And then, so you need to be able to hold that concept of two seemingly opposing concepts existing simultaneously in the same body in your mind. So something's a wave and a particle at the same time, and then depending on how consciousness is applied, it gets put into a particle phase. So it's simultaneously a wave and a particle, and you have to be able to hold those sort of paradoxical concepts in your mind at the same time. And the same holds true for quantum entanglement. Quantum entanglement says once you entangle two molecules, and no matter how much you separate them, when you affect one, it affects the other simultaneously. So it's essentially a thing being in two places at once. And this thing can be on the other side of the entire universe. And if you do something to this, it's as though you did it to this one. And that's also part of holding a concept in your mind that's, it seems paradoxical, or doesn't seem like it can make sense. Basically, one thing existing in two places at once and one thing existing in two states at once. And that's sort of the key to all of the existential concepts, is that things can be multi-dimensional, they can be multi-phase simultaneously in a way that we're not traditionally familiar with in regular 3D reality. So everything can be yes, some things can be yes and no at the same time, depending on the perspective you look at it. And that ends up really being kind of the swing thought for all of human life, is that things are certain things, and they await the application of consciousness being placed upon it. And then when consciousness is applied to it, it has an effect. And then that's when you can kind of start to tell. But until that point, they're more potential phases, right? Like, we have areas of thought that are ideal planes, and then we have, which we can't really see. We can only really sort of conceptualize with our mind. And then when we start getting closer to the 3D reality that we're in, there are these quantum areas that start to make these more conceptualized areas physical. And that's why the wavicle is really an extraordinary find, because matter's not really supposed to act like that. It wasn't supposed to act like that. Well, things can't be in two states at once, and they certainly shouldn't be in a state that is collapsible by consciousness, like observation. That doesn't even make sense, right? It doesn't make sense until it does, because that's just the way it is. And that concept, that approach, that mental approach to understanding what that phenomenon is, which is one that we have no control over, it just is a law of physics. But that mental approach to it, to keep the mind open so that the mind can work in ways that it's not traditionally used to working in, is one of the keys to evolution and growth of mind. So back to, can we fit all the stars into one room? Yes and no. In the beginning of creation, all creation fit into something much smaller than one room. And then it's scaled up. It scaled up and grew out. And at this point, can it? I mean, not as it is. I mean, if we even got a little bit too close to the sun right now, we'd all die. But also, the reality is a sort of holographic, arbitrary dream, like cosmic imagination of itself. And so literally anything could happen. Like tomorrow, just like in a dream, all the rules of the physics can just change sort of arbitrarily. Tomorrow it could be like, oh, well, it's fine. The sun, it'll provide you all your life, but now like the heat radiation for some reason doesn't kill anybody, and it can just be like 10 miles away from the earth, and we don't know why. I mean, that's how life works now. None of this stuff is constant. Like they say, the only constant is change. So it's a good existential thought exercise, because if you're going to be able to open your mind up to process all of creation, or at least be open to the idea of it at all, it's going to have to hold some opposing concepts or seemingly contradictory concepts in the mind simultaneously at once. And it's not to say that there aren't rules of physics and that 3D reality doesn't work a certain way. It's just to say that as philosophers and as people who we want to have a really open mind and try to tap into, be aware of creation in general. It's infinite, so you can't know it all, obviously. Like, it'll break your mind even thinking about it too much, like trying to go into all the permutations and all the evolutions and all that stuff. That's why it's really good to study calculus, because calculus has mathematical equations that, you know, you have limits. You know, you can project outwards in conceptual ways to just kind of like know the general trends and volumes of information and open-ended algorithms, so to say, and then you can put limits and intervals and frequencies, and then that just sort of helps make sense of coordinate all of the frequencies of the concepts of dealing with creation. But in there, and this trips a lot of people up, there are going to be lots of concepts and lots of things that exist that are seemingly contradictory on the face of them. And these sort of fun questions, like, can we fit all the stars in one room? They help us simplify those and make it so that our mind is capable of absorbing those informations in a critical way, but without the traditional rational, logical, seemingly, you know, the illogical portions of them breaking our minds, so that we can still allow the true information to come through and then have its effect, and then we can get to some sort of perspectives, like less analysis, more just perspectives. Because in this philosophical journey, we can't know everything. In fact, most of great philosophers get to the end and go, oh, well, now I finally know that I know nothing. And, you know, I'm certainly there. But there's all these fundamentals of being able to think through some things and have some perspectives that allow us to at least have some vision on things. And it's not that you can always nail everything down 100% or have complete certainty about stuff, but when we have a general algorithm for our mind that allows us to process information and have good observation and perspectives come in that are foreign to us, and we can actually get into a really large learning lesson about life, which includes everything, you know, then at some point maybe we can attain clarity. In clarity, you don't need to know every little thing, how every little thing works. You need to know how a decent amount of the stuff works, and you need to conceptually be cool with the major beats, but you don't need to know how every little thing works. You just have to have achieve a point of some clarity. And so being able to hold these concepts simultaneously is, you know, it's a big key to that. So, well, thanks for spending some time here at Philosopher's Corner. I hope you found it helpful, and have fun.